Hello everybody, this is Tip Top MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over all of the spoilers that have come out for Zendikar Rising today being September 5th. So yeah, I'm just going to go over all the spoilers, tell you what I think about them, and, just kind of look at them. So why don't we jump right into this? Starting off, we have Dauntless Unity. It's a 2-cost white instant, and it has kicker, 1 and a white. And it says, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. If the spell was kicked, those creatures get +2/+1 until end of turn instead. So obviously, there is some versatility here. If you just need a little bit of a pump, you can pay 2, but if you need a little bit bigger of a pump, you can pay 4. The other thing is this card feels really underpowered, and it is a common, so I don't think there's too much we can really expect from it. Next, we have Luminar Aspirant. It's a 2-cost white creature human cleric, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, and it's a 1/1. So essentially, this is a 2/2 for 2 if you want it to be, because as long as it survives to combat, it can put a counter on itself. And this is just going to, for free, put a counter on something every turn. This is really powerful, and if you're running like a Selesnya counter deck, I would not be surprised if this makes its way in, as it's just a free way to put more counters on things. Next, we have Glacial Grasp. It's a 3-cost blue instant, tap target creature. Its controller mills 2 cards. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step, and then draw a card. So this is really nice. You're maybe stopping your opponent from blocking. You're stopping them from attacking. You are drawing a card. In Limited, this will be a pretty good pick, especially with that draw card phrase at the end. Next, we have Jawari Perturbation. It's a 2-cost blue instant and counter target spell unless its controller pays 1, or you can play it as a tapped island. So land, it enters the battlefield tapped, and then you can tap and add blue to your mana pool. So yeah, pretty good. I mean, it's a land if you need it. If you realize your opponent's never going to have, less than 1 mana, play it as a land. Otherwise, you save it for a counter spell. I think this is actually a pretty good counter spell, and I could see a lot of blue decks running this just as a, oh, I could be running an island, but I'm just going to run a Jawari Runes. And yeah, would not be surprised if that's the case. Next, we have Clave Loot. It's a 5-cost blue sorcery. Look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of creatures that make up your party plus 3, so even without a party, it does 3. Add 3 cards from your library to your hand, and then shuffle the rest into your library. Okay, interesting things here. First off, this could theoretically look at the top 7 cards and get 3 of them. Otherwise, it's just, draw 3 for 5. That's what this does without a party, is draw 3 for 5. But with a party, or at least a couple creatures, you get to kind of choose a little bit more. And it doesn't say shuffle, like put the rest of them on the bottom of your library in random order. It says shuffle them into your library. So this is also a way to shuffle your library. So yeah, I think this is a very interesting card. And I would not be surprised if this became, this seems like a pretty good card in a, party deck. So I would not be surprised if you see it in kind of that kind of deck. Next, we have Dreadworm. It's a 5-cost black creature, worm horror, 5/4, and landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, it gains indestructible until end of turn. Okay, this is fine. The issue I have with it is that you can't really put lands down at instant speed, at least that easily. Yes, Growth Spiral, but that's rotating out. So, and I'm sure there are, I know there are ways to do it, but generally, you're going to have to do it on your turn, which means you're going to have to be purposely swinging him into a dangerous situation, and your opponent's already going to know what's happening, so I don't know how well this is even going to do in Limited, but it's kind of interesting. It is at least a 5/4 for 5, and it occasionally gets indestructible, so yeah, I guess it's fine. Next, we have Black Bloom Rogue. It's a 3-cost black creature, human rogue, 2/3 with menace, and it gets +3/+0 as long as an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard. So just, it is a 5/3 with menace for 3 if you're milling your opponent, and it's very easy to get 8 cards in your graveyard, and then it's a land. So I would not be surprised if either you're running a rogue deck or you're running a mill deck if this is one of the cards within it, because honestly, that's not a bad, card. Although the only issue is if you're trying to mill your opponent, are you trying to kill them too? And this card is very much, I'm going to kill my opponent with the menace and the low toughness. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's, a little bit too much of a conflict, but we'll see. Next, we have a Shadow Stinger. It's a 3-cost black creature, vampire rogue, 1/4, and you can tap another untapped rogue you control, and it gains Death Touch until end of turn. And then, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player mills 3 cards. So, deals combat damage to a player, mills 3 cards, that's pretty good. You can give it Death Touch, which means they won't want to block. It's just, this is a pretty good card if you're trying to do anything with rogues or milling, so I like the card. And I'm not saying I like rogues and milling. I'm just saying that if you were running, it's an interesting, it's not just, oh, I'm going to mill you and I'm going to mill you. It's interesting. You're tapping untapped rogues. You're gaining death touch. You're doing lots of different things. It's not just, very simple. Next, we have Inordinate Rage, It's a 2-cost red instant. Target creature gets +3/+2 until end of turn and scry 1. I'd put rather Infuriate for 1 red. That gives something +3/+2 until end of turn and you don't scry. I don't know if that's rotating out. I know it was printed in M20, but I think it was reprinted since then. And if that's the case, it's obviously this is a worse card, but it is also another version of the card. So maybe the sees play somewhere, but I'm not a huge fan of it. Next, we have Scorch Writer, 4-cost, red creature, human warrior, 4/3 with kicker 2, and whenever it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, it gains haste. So you either get a 4/3 for 4 or a 4/3 for 6 with haste. I actually don't hate kicker here. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you're most of the time just going to play it as a 4/3 for 4, but if you're in that limited environment and you happen to have the extra mana, just play it as a haster. But if you don't need to play it as a haster, maybe you're not going to swing with it anyway, just play it. So I like the card. In terms of the design of it, obviously I'm not going to run it in anything. It's a very limited based card, and most commons are, and that's how they should be. You shouldn't have your Arboreal Grazer that is going to actually make an impact on standard. Next, we have Magmatic Channeler. It's a 2-cost red creature, human wizard, and as long as there are 4 or more instant and or sorcery cards in your graveyard, Magmatic Channeler gets +3/+1, so it will be a 4/4. So cast 4 instants. This is a 4/4 for 2. Pretty good. You can tap and discard a card, which is going to help you fill your graveyard with instants and sorceries to exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may choose one of them and play the card this turn, which, if it's an instant or sorcery, hey, now you just basically put 2 instants and sorceries in your graveyard. Yeah, this is kind of a discard a card, draw 2, but repeatable for no mana. The only thing is it's an impulsive draw, not just a normal draw. So this is a really powerful card. I would not be surprised if this sees some play in an instant and sorcery kind of deck. We've seen a lot of very powerful 2-drops in this set, with just lots of abilities that can do lots of really awesome things in the rare slot. So we'll have to see. I think that this one could actually see some play, although with all of Izzet rotating out, maybe a little bit harder to do. Next, we have Leyline Tyrant, and this is probably one of the most, I would say, problematic cards that they've released for the set so far. It's a 4-cost red creature dragon, 4/4 with flying. So it's a 4/4 for 4 with flying. Okay, you don't lose unspent red mana as steps and phases end. That does not sound very red. And I'm like, okay, maybe they're going to have some ability where it's at your end step, you remove all your red mana and it turns into damage. And so it's kind of, it still feels red or, but no, when it dies, you may pay any amount of red mana. When you it deals that much damage to any target. Okay, here's what I have an issue with about this card. This breaks the color pie, or at least bends it a lot. The only cards that I can recall that do this are Omnath, Locus of Mana, which does it with green mana, which I think makes sense, green, And then we had the god from Theros, Crufix, who could just turn all your mana into colorless mana. And both of those involved green. Crufix was also blue. This does not feel like a red ability. How would I have made this a red ability? Okay, you don't lose unspent red mana as steps and phases end, as long as you've dealt damage to your opponent since your last combat step. Cool, now you get to kind of do this whole ramping thing with red, but you have to make sure you're still using enough of your resources to get damage through, and your opponent can stop it by just not letting you deal damage to them. Or, I don't know, at your end step, you can have up to a certain amount of red mana saved equal to the amount of damage you've dealt. I don't know, something like that. Or you could have said you don't lose unspent red mana as steps and phases end, but at the beginning of your end step, you may pay, you lose all red mana in your mana pool. When you do, you deal that much damage to target creature or even target player. But for 4, you're telling me that red can just now start to ramp faster than any other color on turn 4 with the 4/4 flyer. That is insane, and I feel like this should have been Gruul. It should have been damage based. It should have only let you save it for maybe your turn. I don't know. This just doesn't feel red to me, and it feels like they're just, they're like, we don't care about the color pie anymore. We're just kind of printing this, and it doesn't feel like red. I know one of the issues people are going to have with this is it's not a fast card. You are not running this in a mono red rush deck. But I have an issue with this. I would not be surprised even if this shows up in like non-just mono red decks, like even red green. It's such a good ramp card that green may want to add red to their mana to make this work. So I think that is a problem, and I think that this should have either costed like 7 or like made it unplayable or been in a different color. I really dislike this card, and I think that it is a bad direction for red to be able to basically now ramp better than green. Like, red is supposed to not be able to ramp. It's not supposed to be able to have 42 million mana, and red is one of the, colors that wants to have all this mana for like giant X spells that are just going to kill you right off the spot. So I just really dislike this. Let's move on to the next one. I'm sorry I ranted on that for a little bit, but I want to know what you guys think. Is this a good direction for red? Does this card feel red to you? And do you think this card should have been another color? Next, we have Kazundu Nectar Pot. It's a 2-cost green creature insect 1/3 with landfall, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Very generic, very boring, very limited, obviously. Next, we have Scale the Heights, 3-cost green sorcery. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. You gain 2 life. You may play an additional land this turn, draw a card. So this is kind of Explore, which is a 2-cost draw a card. You may play an additional land this turn, but instead you're putting counters, gaining life, and you can play an additional land, but it costs 1 extra mana, which I think is pretty relevant. Is this better than Uro? No, because Uro comes back. So this is just kind of worse Uro, but I wouldn't be surprised if people tried to make this work. Next, we have Canopy Ballast. It's a 4-cost green creature beast, 4/3, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Yeah, I can see this, green-red kind of ramp landfall deck that's just going to play all these creatures that just get bigger, +2/+2 for every land, and at least this is going to be something in limited that I think is going to be very powerful and very fast, because we've seen a lot of this exact wording, so I expect it to be something that you can see in limited a lot. Next, we have Spring Mantle Cleric. It's a 5-cost green elf cleric, 2/3, and it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color mana spent to cast it. So you're paying 5 for a 2/3, but if you're in a multicolor deck, you could theoretically pay 5 Wooburg mana, which is much harder than just 5 mana, to get a 7/8. Green can already kind of just get a 6/6 for 5, and that's not trying to, run a 5-color deck. So not a huge fan of this card. It feels like you're jumping through too many hoops to not get that great of a reward. You're getting a generic creature that doesn't even have trample. I think if this had trample, I may have been like, okay, yeah, that's kind of interesting, but this just doesn't feel powerful enough for you to try and go out of your way to get Wooburg. I mean, for Wooburg, you could literally cast anything in the game if you played Joda. So, like, I don't know. Next, we have Clave Pickaxe. It's a 1-cost green artifact equipment, and it enters the battlefield attached to target creature, which I believe every single artifact equipment has done in this set. So maybe this is a new direction for artifacts or for equipment, just because, hey, we realize that playing it, then equipping it makes it so that we have to have cheaper equip costs, which then means that the equipment could be abused a little bit more. But if we can just make it a one-time free equip thing, I don't know, I like the direction. But hey, remember that text of whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, equipped creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn? Well, this has it too. So yeah, this gives that ability to something else for 1 green mana. Again, I think this could totally be a deck that tries to just throw lots of lands on the battlefield. The only thing is I haven't seen too many throw lands on the battlefield cards, so I'm not sure. Next, we have the commander cards. So these were leaked. So if you guys don't want leaks, if you want to be told about everything as you're meant to be told about it, click off the video now. But what happened was some seller on some site, sorry, let's back us up a little bit. On Wizards website, you can see the commander decks for Zendikar Rising. And if you guys didn't know, I guess we're going back even a little further. They're replacing Planeswalker decks in all products except for core sets, which there isn't even going to be a core set next year. But they're replacing the Planeswalker decks with commander decks that are meant to be kind of on-ramps onto commander. That if you haven't started playing commander yet, it's a slightly lower power than their pre-con. So for a lot of people, it's not going to be what you want. But it does come with a couple, I believe each deck has 3 new cards, one of them being the face card. And so they had the art on the packaging and all that, but they didn't have the actual card. But then some seller somewhere accidentally showed the photos with the cards in them. So we have blurry photos of the commanders. So we have Anowin, The Ruin Thief, it's a 2 blue-black legendary creature, vampire rogue, 2/4, and it says other rogues you control get +1/+1. So that's just overall good. If you are running a rogue deck out right now with some other commander, you are probably now going to also run this, just because it is that good. Now, then he also has, whenever one or more rogues you control deal combat damage to a player, that player mills a card for each 1 damage dealt to them, so you're going to mill them 2. Just with him alone. If that player mills at least 1 creature card this way, you draw a card. So, here's the thing to note. First off, if you're hitting them with 5 rogues, you're still only going to go draw... So, okay, here's how this works. You hit them with 5 rogues. Let's say they're all 2/2s. You're going to hit them with 5 rogues. They were dealt 10 damage. They are going to mill 10 cards. And then as long as... then they're going to mill 10 cards, and if they get 1 creature within those 10 cards, you draw a card. But if, for instance, you get 5 creatures, like each rogue that hits does not do its own damage. It says 1 or more rogues, so it's going to take whenever 1 or more rogues hits, then it's going to take all the damage dealt to them dealt to them by a rogue, and then it's going to mill that many cards with 1 trigger on the stack, and if any of those cards with the total combined amount of cards mills is a creature, you draw 1 card. So you are not going to draw 3 cards if you hit them with 3 rogues and happen to mill 3 creatures. That's not how that works. It's not a bunch of separate triggers. I've seen some people mess that up, and I just want to get that through. I think this card is okay. It has card draw, which is nice on a commander. It's a booster, which I think is really powerful, but I think that there may be better options out there, and this may be better suited inside of a rogue deck, just as a, all rogues get +1/+1. Next, we have Boon Ancestor. It's a 1 red, green, white legendary creature, elf spirit, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, up to 1 target land you control becomes a XX elemental with trample and haste until end of turn, where X is its power, it's still a land. Here's my issue with this. First off, it has to be an untapped land, because it doesn't untap it. I think if this untapped it, it would have been a much more powerful card with a lot more ways it could work. And it's only until end of turn, which can be both a good and a bad thing. It means that, you don't have to worry about your opponent, killing it on their turn or something. It's a little safer from board wipes and all of that. But then he also has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a counter on target creature. So if you make him bigger, then the elementals become bigger, because the elementals are based on his power. Overall, this one feels a little bit underpowered. I mean, here's everything you get. First off, you get 1 somewhat big creature with all your landfall triggers, which I guess, sure, that can be a commander on its own, but it's a little lame there. And then you get to create, a 7/7 by putting 1 of your lands in danger. I'm just not a huge fan of this. It doesn't even untap it, so you are, sacrificing 1 of your mana to do it, and they don't even get Vigilant, so you can't use the land afterwards. So, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this. I wish it was a little bit more powerful. Alrighty guys, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, please hit that like button. Let me know what you guys think about all these cards in the comments down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.